Well, it's the year 2025, and Mark Rosewater has some words for us for how Magic's been designed lately, and I have some words for him too. So about 10 hours ago, as of the recording of this video, the State of Design 2025 document was released for all of us to see. This is the yearly come together with Magic players, where Maro sits down and talks to us about how the design team feel they've done over the last year and how fans were receiving their work. All in all, I absolutely adore stuff like this because my primary game coming to Magic the Gathering, I came from Yu-Gi-Oh! And Yu-Gi-Oh! Is incredibly just obtuse about why it makes certain decisions. Now, if you play the game for a while, you end up kind of figuring out the general gist of why certain things are done, but all things considered, Yu-Gi-Oh! Does not communicate well with its player base as to why they are making certain decisions. It's just not a thing that Konami's ever done. Now, that may be because Konami is primarily a Japanese company, and we are on the American side of things, but I don't think that the OCG receives the same kind of communication that Wizards gives us over in the States. So again, I think that criticism of Yu-Gi-Oh! Can always sit around. So I'm very happy that this happens, but there is some criticism that I want to give to Wizards of the Coast in general, and that is that while having this open line of communication with us is fantastic, I do feel like some of the concerns that Magic players have had over the years generally don't get addressed. For one, Universes Beyond. I think that most enfranchised Magic players are just tired of Universes Beyond, and we had complaints when it was Secret Layers, and then those mostly went by the wayside. Then we had the conversation about it being universes within cards would be coming to us after Universes Beyond cards came to us. We saw this with The Walking Dead and Street Fighter, and then eventually Wizards just stopped doing that. Like, if I were to real quick just go into the Force of the Imperium deck, just for one, for Universes Beyond, these are cards that are legal in Legacy, these are cards that are legal in Commander, and these are cards that a lot of people want to have access to, and several of these cards were super cheap. I remember when this deck came out, Sister Hospitaller was in my $15 Sephiroth deck, which now is no longer $15. I think it's bumped up to like $40 because the Sister Hospitaller is now $8.60, or like $8.60. Celestine is now $21, and then if you go to the vehicles in the deck, it's just kind of nutty. Reaver Titans $21, Knight Paladins $4 on its own. Like, I'm okay if a card is between $1 and $4, but once you start getting to $20, you got to remember that Commander decks are made of 99 unique cards, not counting basic lands. There's only so many of these you can have in a deck before it becomes exorbitantly expensive to play. And that's just for Commander players. That's just for players who focus on that part of the game. I also play Pioneer, and you know what? I want to go back to the State of Design thing, but before we get into more of it, I have some concerns. So my primary format is Commander, but that is not by choice. My primary format is Commander because that's what everybody around me plays. So that's what I play as well. And my channel is dedicated to it because I love brewing decks, and we have far more space to brew decks in Commander due to the Rule Zero agreements. But if I were to gush about anything, I love playing Modern, I love playing Pioneer, and I recently started dabbling into Pauper. So if I start looking at the Modern metagame for Magic the Gathering, why should I have to spend $943 to play the Boros Energy deck? Why should Domain Aggro cost me $800? In what world is any of that okay? And the deck that I play primarily is Hardened Scales, and that deck uses Mox Opals. Why in the world would I ever want my opponents to be in be against me when I've got Mox Opals in my deck and they do not? 4-color Breach, $1,723. And remember, these are sanctioned events, so anybody who tries to come in and say, oh, well, you could just proxy. No, you can't. You can't proxy in Modern. It's not a thing you can do in Modern because you play Modern to go into competitive events with people. So Wizards of the Coast is always just not giving us what we need in these formats to make them affordable. There's no world where every deck should be $500 plus in any card game. I know this was the case in Yu-Gi-Oh! With Baron de Fleur and several other cards, and we don't have to worry about this in, say, Pokemon. Like, I got to build Shine Pow for $30 and Gardevoir for $40. So trying to get people into 1v1 competitive Magic when you're like, hey, by the way, you may not like this game, but your starting price tag is the price of a video game console and also several games. And if you don't like it, then you're never going to be able to sell all those cards for the market value that they are, because the only people that are going to be willing to buy those cards are going to be card shops, and they're always going to have to make a buck. Pioneer is in a decent spot, but we run into two problems with Pioneer. Again, it costs me the price of a video game console for several of these decks if I were to play. Now, I play a modified Dimir Precon as a Days Undoing Dimir control deck, and I play Golgari Rock because I love Glissa, and I want to play a deck with Glissa. So those are the decks I play. Neither of the decks that I play are meta decks, but if I were to play decks within the meta, then I would be looking at Rakdos Demons, Azorius Control, Selesnya, Coco, the Angels deck. All of that stuff would be what I'd be playing in Pioneer, but here's the problem with Pioneer. Wizards isn't supporting Pioneer. Look at the names of these decks. These are the same decks that we've had in Pioneer for years, for the most part. All of these are the decks we've had for years. You don't see a ton of innovation in the Pioneer space because you don't see a lot of players in the Pioneer space. The only place you can go play Pioneer is if you are lucky enough to be in an LGS that has Pioneer, or you have Moto and you have gotten your collection to the point on Moto where you can play Pioneer. You can play it on Arena, but that creates another problem. Magic the Gathering, and this is something that I'm going to go ahead and say with my full chest, Magic is not a game to be played in digital. I'm sorry. I recognize that there are people who play Magic in digital and enjoy it, but there is no format of Magic that I find enjoyable in digital when sitting across the table from a real flesh and blood human being is an option for me. And the existence of Magic the Gathering in digital actively takes players away from those standard spaces. Now, this, for some reason, wasn't the case with Moto. Moto existing didn't take away from Magic the Gathering players existing and playing Standard and Pioneer. Well, Pioneer didn't exist back then, and Modern, but for some reason, Arena seems to have taken away from that. Either Arena's doing it or Commander's cannibalizing it. I don't know the logistics there, nor do I know the solution. I thought that Universes Beyond coming into Standard would be a solution for players playing Standard, and I just still don't see players playing Standard. So I guess that's an opinion that was based entirely in naivete. So what am I getting from this before we get to the state of the game? I love Magic the Gathering, but I love Magic the Gathering. I do not love Commander the Gathering. I love Magic. This last Friday, I was at an LGS, and an old friend of mine sat down to play a couple games of Modern with me and a couple games of Pioneer, and the absolute light in my eyes as I was sitting down playing those formats that I adore for the first time in what felt like months. Holy crap. But unfortunately, one other person having access to the cards because they played the game for as long as they did does not mean that we can run a tournament there. And this is where Pauper would come in. Now we just have to convince people to play Pauper, but you see where I'm going with this. I love Magic, but Commander is all we seem to get people to play. So ideally, the state of game design should be here to address some of that to get people's butts in seats at LGSs in tournaments. And let's see what Maro has to say. Well, he begins by saying, as always, I start by looking back at the year as a whole, examining the highlights and lessons of the year. I'll then talk about each booster release with new content, examining the highlights and lessons of each set. This is an amazing amount, there's an amazing amount of great design work that went into the booster releases, but I am but one man with one column, so I'm going to talk today about the booster releases. Note that this article is more focused on big picture design than individual card by card notes. This column will cover Bloomburrow through Magic the Gathering Final Fantasy. I wonder, hold on, in 2024, did Maro talk about another set? Did he talk about Askred? No, wait, why is he not talking about Assassin's Creed? That's weird. So Bloomburrow to Final Fantasy. So this would have been written before Edge of Eternity's released and then released now. That's what I would have guessed. So are we just ignoring Assassin's Creed? Like, I'm okay ignoring Assassin's Creed, but I feel like from a design perspective, you can't ignore Assassin's Creed, because like for me, what came out of that set, a reprint of Conspiracy and Brotherhood Regalia, which is going in my Amy Rose deck. I guess that's exciting, kind of. And then another, like yet another copy paste 5-color made for commander in the Ezio that everybody runs as their assassin deck now, which just homogenizes game design. I guess that's what was in there. That's honestly kind of boring, actually. Maybe that's why he's not talking about it. I don't know. Anyway, Maro says that I believe that this year was excellent. Some of the best design work we've done. The sets, save maybe Aetherdrift, were all well received. In all the feedback I got this year, every set had multiple people call it their favorite, and not just of the year. This all coincides with Magic being at its all-time high for players. More people are playing Magic today than have ever played at any other point in the game's 32-year history. We have a number of metrics we use to measure the game's health, and all of the metrics are the highest that we have seen. That's all fair, but I'm gonna be honest, I feel like those metrics mostly cover sales figures, because like if we're looking at each individual format based on the health of the format, you can't measure Commander because it's super diverse, but you can measure Standard, and Standard had the monstrous rage problem where like Corey Steelcutter red decks were just the only deck that people would play, and that ruined Standard for a lot of players, you know, all 3 of the players that play Standard still. So looking at that, I don't know if Magic design was good for Standard players. What about Modern players? Well, in the last year and a half, we got Mox Opal back into Modern, and that just increased the price of Modern for all players. Now, I'm not gonna lie, all of the extra tools that Tron got means that I did need that Mox Opal to deal with matchups like Tron, because Karn counters my deck, but not having the ability to have that card available to players afterwards is just diabolical. I'm gonna be honest, like there's no world where a $160 card should be the backbone of any deck in any card game. That is peak luxury hobby. And I know that there's criticism saying like, well, there's other hobbies that are more expensive. Cool, that's an interesting take. That's also a fucking fallacy. Like, that's actually the Tu Quoque fallacy. So, Tu Quoque is a fallacy where you discredit an argument by attacking your interlocutor's personal behavior instead of addressing the problems in your own area. This is also called whataboutism. So, the way it functions for this argument is player A says that Magic is too expensive, and player B says, well, what about cars? And then person A just goes, I wasn't fucking talking about cars, Dave. Shut up. And there you go. Like that conversation is over, but it is just Tu Quoque. It's a fallacy. When you bring up other hobbies being expensive, that doesn't mean that the hobby that we engage in should also be super expensive when it is literally just cardboard printed on 2 sheets of paper. Now, we then have Maro saying that it doesn't mean that they did everything right. Every release had some lessons, but they'll get into those, and that's fair. Like, I understand where that's coming from. So let's see here. Highlights. We did a good job at finding our roots. One of the big lessons prior to the prior Magic year was that Magic sets needed to feel more Magic-y. Yeah, I'll agree. So without even reading further ahead, I hate hat sets. I know that everybody has spoken like at length, like ad infinitum, about hat sets, and a hat set is just a set where characters go into an area and then there is a gimmick around that area and everybody dresses up for the gimmick. So like arguably the first hat set, not necessarily a full set, but Crimson Vow, it was already not a very well received set by the community, but Crimson Vow focused itself on the gimmick of a vampire wedding, and so some characters were dressed in wedding regalia. This is probably the best way you could do a hat set, in my opinion. There is a gimmick, but ultimately it's centered around returning to Innistrad. It was a 2-set story, which is something that we need to return to as well. And while you did have stuff like Chandra Dressed to Kill, which is literally just Chandra in a fiery wedding outfit because she's going to a wedding, it's still a better execution than, say, other things. The other version of a hat set that I don't mind too much would be New Capenna. Like, New Capenna is definitely a hat set. It is all the Magic the Gathering characters go to a plane where everything is, you know, mobsters and, you know, noir, and they have to dress in the, you know, the setting of the time, like, you know, LA in the middle of the 60s. That is what everybody is going to be dressed as. And you know what? I get it. I understand why they went that way, because within the story of the set, many of the characters were actively trying to stay incognito and stay undercover, and it made sense. There was even an entire thing where, you know, Vivian found Tezzeret in disguise and tried to hunt him down, and then Tezzeret led her to Urabrask, and Urabrask is wearing a hat too, but Urabrask is just dying, and Vivian has the line of like, why did you lead me here? What are your plans? And Tezzeret just goes, the plan is freedom. And then suddenly Vivian's on the side of Tezzeret, and it's a great scene. It's a great moment in the story. I like New Capenna. The problem with New Capenna is that you don't do this idea multiple times. You let this be the one, like, neat gimmick where there was a good reason why everybody was where they were. One of the worst executions of this was in Karlov Manor, where for some reason everybody in Ravnica is now a detective for some reason. Like, I don't know why. I don't understand why they are all detectives. I don't care that they killed some of my favorite characters. Like, I don't like characters being killed when they don't need to be, and that's literally just, let's kill them so that people can have fun figuring out why Teysa is dead. But I'm gonna be honest, I don't like sets like this and Thunder Junction, where it's just, let's put everybody in cowboy hats, let's put everybody in detective hats. These are bad executions of this idea, and Aetherdrift is the one that we got this year, and well, two of them, Aetherdrift and Duskmourn. And Aetherdrift, I also did not enjoy the setting. So much like with Crimson Vow, the point of Aetherdrift was to center everything on the idea of a race. Crimson Vow was set on the idea that everybody is there for a wedding. Aetherdrift is everybody's there for a race. Thunder Junction was everybody's in the Wild West. Basically, you can either theme this around a planet with an aesthetic or a event with an aesthetic. In this case, it's an event with an aesthetic, and the event was Wacky Racers. And again, I feel like this is the type of thing that if you do this once every 3 or 4 years, players are going to get on board with it. Players are going to love it, because it doesn't fatigue the players towards what you're doing. But if every single set you do is going to be like this, where no matter what they do, they can't engage with, you know, Chandra as Chandra. They have to engage with Chandra as a pit racer, which is not a major part of her character as far as I'm aware from her time on Abishkar over to now. Like, that's just not who she is. I'm sure it's a thing that she can do, but I don't care about Chandra in that way. I don't. I would much rather explore her relationship with Nissa, for instance, something that Wizards also tried to shy away from exploring for a really long time. But the idea that everybody in the multiverse is racing, it feels like the worst way you could execute the Omen Paths idea. The Omen Paths opening years ago was supposed to be a thing that fundamentally changed how Magic operated for years. We had just gotten off of a long-running story about the Phyrexian invasion, which got ended all too soon, and then Open Paths opened everywhere, and now everybody should be allowed to traverse the multiverse however they wish. What this should mean is that interesting characters from different areas are able to move to other areas. So, like, I want to see Feather go to New Capenna, and, you know, Feather is one of the most important angels on Ravnica, so going to New Capenna, where angels are basically harvested for the cocaine that comes out of their blood, I want to see how Feather reacts to that. That would be interesting. Instead, we get everybody goes on wacky racers, and there's barely any mention about anything at all. Like, yeah, they go to Muraganda, and they go to Avishkar, and they go to Amonkhet, and there is zero flavor from any of those places anywhere on the cards. Like, I don't like that. That's boring. It's incredibly boring from a design perspective, and it's incredibly boring from a set thematic perspective. So when Mark Rosewater says that, hey, they got better at finding their roots, I'm happy about that, because Magic the Gathering finding its roots means that we get to go to more places that feel like we are part of Magic the Gathering. Everybody seemed to enjoy Tarkir Dragonstorm and was just like, it feels like I'm playing Magic again. your game has gone off the deep end if people are saying it feels like I'm playing Magic again. And that was a sentiment shared amongst a ton of people that I know who are, do limited environments and try to do 60 card formats. They love that stuff. The Thunder Junction stuff seemed to be enjoyed more by people who were playing Universes Beyond primarily. Like, that's how they got into the game. People who don't have any connection to the characters don't care when the characters get flanderized, but people who do have a connection to the characters do care. Like, I grew up reading about Argus Kos, so seeing Kos come back in a lot of sets is cool to me because it makes sense. The Orzhov holds his soul the same way they hold everybody's soul, so of course he's able to stick around as a ghost. I like that kind of stuff. I don't like when that stuff gets flanderized. So we made a new setting that felt deep and immersive. Another complaint was that some of the sets felt too thin, especially sets around New Worlds. Bloomburrow and Duskmourn House of Horror were radically different in tone. Both showed Magic's ability to create new things that still felt ingrained in the multiverse in an organic way. So I kind of agree with this, and I kind of don't. I feel like the more things you stuff into the potentialities of the multiverse, the less interesting the multiverse becomes. Like, Alara is a really cool place for how it is shattered and how it functions, but it becomes less interesting when it is right next to Duskmourn, which just looks like an episode of it just looks like you're going back and rewatching The Sandlot with horror elements. I don't think that that's super great. You can have those interesting worlds that have elements, but if those elements are still ingrained in fantasy, then I think that's fine. So, like, we go from Alara, okay, the concept of mana in Magic the Gathering is flipped on its head, and it's sharded up between a bunch of areas. Cool. You go to Ravnica, it's Star Wars' Coruscant, but there's 10 guilds based off the mana of Magic. Neat. You go and you experience the Ice Age. Okay, Urza blew up a bomb, and now Dominaria is changed for 1,000 years, and this is the rough and tumble of people trying to live in an Ice Age he created. Okay, cool. I like Ice Age and Cold Snap because it shows that kind of stuff. But when we go to Duskmourn, it's what if these people visited a different area? It's like those guest star episodes of old Scooby-Doo where you're kind of happy that Don Knotts and Batman have made their way into an episode of Scooby-Doo, but, like, you don't want that to be all of what Scooby-Doo is, and that's what Magic has been doing for a bit. Let's see here. We found a lot of valuable design space in tweaking known things. We made a lot of new mechanics like Offspring, Valiant, and Manifest Dread. Oh, I really love Manifest Dread. I am happy about that. Impending, Omen, Exhaust, Harmonize. I'm not going to name all of them. You can read them. The year was full of a lot of mechanics that were things Magic had done before, but tweaked. Yeah, Omen is adventures, but tweaked. Everything else is kicker, and the things that are not kicker are horsemanship. We also found room for some new things to do, like gifting, rooms, and starting your engines. They were core elements of the sets that they appeared in. So I don't think gifting and rooms, they are technically new, but, like, gifting is just kicker, but your opponent gets a thing instead of you paying a thing. And rooms, again, rooms are just kicker, but you paid for half of a card and the kicker is paid later. It's delayed kicker, which, I mean, again, all things are kicker, so I guess that's not really a complaint. We're getting pretty good at making limited environments. I feel like this is not something that should be said 30 years into a game's existence. I feel like Magic has always had really good limited environments, some better than others. I loved Time Spiral's limited environment. I liked Ravnica's limited environment. I adored Alara's limited environment. Get me Alara limited tomorrow, and I'm just going to be the happiest guy on the fucking planet. Like, I love that kind of stuff. And Innistrad's limited environment, I have heard, is really good, but I have not personally had a chance to play in that limited environment, so I don't have experience there, but I've heard really good things about it. I feel as though we're getting pretty good. Maybe means that there's a lot of experience that got dumped down the toilet somewhere. A common response from the sets this year was how much fun players had playing the limited environments of these sets. We're constantly adapting and improving our technology to make fun limited environments, and I feel this last year was part of an upward trend in this area. Oh, I should probably note, if you really like limited environments like I do, then maybe you should build a cube. Like, just sidebar, just side thing, build a cube. Just build a cube. I promise you, you're going to have some of the most fun ever if you build a cube. And maybe I'll make a video about how to build an effective cube, because I made a cube recently, and I've been taking it up to my LGS and to my friends' houses, and it has been an absolute blast to play. So let's... You know what? That'll be a video I do in the future. I'm going to put my cube up on a website, and then we're gonna do some analyzing of it and see what works, what doesn't work, and we're gonna teach some people how to build a cube. That sounds like a fun thing to do. I need to do more than just Commander content. Anyway, lessons. Magic is at its best when we recontextualize the tropes we're working with. Resonance is an important part of game design. When we explore new themes, there are certain expectations that it's important for us to hit in our card designs, but we need to be careful that we're doing our take on the trope and not just repeating it without any filter. Universes beyond sets are where we should do straight illusions and not in multiverse sets. Both Duskmourn, House of Horror, and Aetherdrift suffered from being a bit too on the nose with some of their releases. Yeah, Duskmourn just having like 80s horror, but Magic themed, it is very on the nose. And then I guess with Aetherdrift, the blue shell card and the fact that we had it's just Wacky Racers or Mario Kart, it's very, very on the nose. I feel like that's the stuff you do when you do a Universes Beyond Mario set, not the stuff you do when you're doing a Magic the Gathering set. I think Magic's IP can be very strong if Magic is willing to invest in its own IP. Like, I want the Magic the Gathering Netflix show that we were promised ages ago. I want that show to come out and be good, because I want to live in a world where I can say the name Jace and somebody will understand that I mean that fucker that won't die even though his story concluded ages ago. That's what I want. I want to live in that world where I can say the name of a Magic character and people know what I'm talking about, as opposed to only Magic character, only Magic players knowing what I'm talking about. Like, I can say the name Sonic, and people who don't play Sonic know who Sonic is. I can say the name Mario. People who don't know Mario, like don't play the games, know who Mario is. I can say Luffy, and people know that. But if I say Vraska, not one single motherfucker outside of a card shop is gonna know who that is. And I feel like that's something that Wizards could work on. And the way you do that is by building a very, very good multimedia empire, as opposed to just building a card game empire. There is a reason that Magic the Gathering does not collaborate with other IPs. Other IPs collaborate with Magic the Gathering, because Magic's characters are not easily identifiable unless you are a player of Magic the Gathering. You do not know who Kellen is unless you give a fuck about the lore of Magic. You don't know who Valgavoth is unless you give a fuck about the lore of Magic. Maybe the most iconic Magic character of all time is probably Nicol Bolas. Like, nowadays, the only iconic thing I can think from Magic is like the silhouette of his horns. And I know people who don't play Magic who have a vague idea of who Nicol Bolas is, because we had that really cool opening animation for War of the Spark. Like, I kind of see that a little bit. Lean into that more. That'll help a ton. You can do more sets based on the cool lore of your characters when you focus on the cool lore of your characters. And you do that by doing like what League of Legends did with Arcane. You do that by doing what other IPs have been doing. Hell, even Yu-Gi-Oh! Has recently released animations about the lore of their cards, something that they never did before. Yu-Gi-Oh's always been the card game, and then the anime where the players play the card game. The most recent attempt has been making short anime episodes based on the stories of like the Sky Strikers and stuff. That's so cool. Magic could do the same. It doesn't. So we need to be aware of, we need to be better at supporting our themes downstream of our designs. Each set wants to introduce new mechanical themes. Part of the fun of getting into a set is exploring new possible decks, but while we're good at creating new places to explore, we need to be a little better at following up beyond that set. Yeah, you know, the easiest way to do that, go back to blocks. Please, Wizards of the Coast, go back to blocks. Go back to creating blocks. For those who don't know, a block is a set of cards where you have 2 to 3 sets. And each set is part of the same story. This means stories and characters get time to breathe within the execution of the set, and mechanics get time to breathe in the set as well. You introduce mechanics bit by bit throughout the different sets, but you still have callbacks to the other one. For Ravnica, the way this worked is we had like the first 4 guilds in Ravnica, and then we had the next 3 guilds in Guild Pact, and then we had the next 3 guilds in Dissension. That way, instead of having 300 cards to support the mechanics of 10 different guilds, we had 3 sets where only a handful of guilds needed to be represented each set. And that was insanely good. And then there were obviously cards released for the other guilds within later sets, and cards released for the earlier guilds in earlier sets. Like, you'd get Rakdos cards in the first set, but you would not get the Hellbent mechanic until, say, the last set, the Dissension set. You wouldn't get the named mechanic of that guild until later. That way, that mechanic had a lot of time to breathe in its own set, and you could do a ton of execution on that mechanic in its own set. I want blocks to come back. Blocks were good for Magic the Gathering. I feel like Magic the Gathering's been worse since blocks went away. So we need to be aware of complexity creep while we've been working to make sure the individual mechanics are less complex overall. There's a trend in the last year of us making the sets complex in mechanical interaction. Some of this is in the volume of mechanics we include, and some of this is about the choice of the mechanics. The tricky part is that we want mechanical synergy as it leads to better limited gameplay and constructed deck building, but we need to be careful that we don't make an interconnected web that prevents the average player from being able to track what's happening. So this is a thing that I don't know if you've noticed. If you have played a lot of Magic the Gathering, you can glance at a board state and kind of understand what's going on if you're familiar with the environment. But if you haven't played Magic before, looking at a Magic board, you can't tell what the fuck's going on. You look at the board of Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's a bit easier. There's only 10 cards to keep track, or 12 cards to keep track of, depending on the board state. And you can just go like, okay, well, there's a lot of cards that have floodgate effects, and then there are face down cards that are traps, and that is as complicated as it gets. Magic board states can get really, really complicated, so I can understand that. Then Maro goes into talking about Bloomburrow, saying that, Bloomburrow was great because of the interconnection and the world building, the creative design, game design, artwork was a home run. I did like the story of Bloomburrow. I liked the idea of Mabel trying to run away from the giant scary animals. I liked the idea of Raul gets there, turns into an otter, and he's just running around screaming he needs to kill Jace like he's in Akira. Like, I liked that. That was cool. I did enjoy that. See, what lessons did they learn from that? For some, the limited themes were too on rails. I mean, it was tribal, right? Like, it's typal tribal kindred. When you have a set that is all kindred mechanics, it can feel really on rails. This is something that we saw earlier on in a previous set. What was it? Lorwyn was the set. Lorwyn was built this way, where like you would build elementals a certain way, you would build druids a certain way. So we have seen this before, but it was executed pretty well back then. But my memory on it is kind of fuzzy. There wasn't the right mix of animals. For some, 10 animals were too many. 10 different factions, each with their own animal, caused a complex web that was too hard to decipher. We should have just had 5 animal factions. I can agree with that. Again, this is back to the block issue. You can do 10 animal factions if you do 5 animal factions in Bloomburrow 1 and 5 animal factions in Bloomburrow 2. That would be really cool. And then you have like 2 cards for the factions for the first set in the next set, and 2 cards for the factions in the next set in the first set. That way there's like a hint of what's in the other set that gets expounded upon in the next set. That's how you do that kind of design. Again, it's a thing that Wizards has done in the past. There was some disappointment with the mechanical execution of some of the animals, and then too many of the animals we focused on didn't have enough cards. I guess, yeah, so like otters don't have a ton of cards, bats never had a ton of cards, whereas squirrels are like, squirrels have all the cards in the world. Squirrels exist in Pauper. So I guess I can kind of understand where this is coming from, but this is a problem that gets solved by having more Bloomburrow sets. Like you build more Bloomburrow sets, you solve this problem. So that's a temporary problem. Duskmourn, House of Horror. The overall feel of the plane was a big success. The mechanics led to fun synergies. The contrast to Bloomburrow showcased what makes Magic so great. The 80s horror theme was forced in the set and distracted from the overall vibe. There's a fine line between being inspired by something and then being a carbon copy of it. Yeah, it was just 80s horror Like, it didn't feel inspired by 80s horror. It just felt like 80s horror with a Magic the Gathering coat of paint, which is not inspiration. That's just aping. So I can see where they're coming from. Players have some issues with one of the set's creative choices. The set consciously pushed into some space Magic had never been before. Many were popular, but one area got the most criticism. Players are not fans of the mundane modernity Magic has had in many sets. Okay, I can understand that. So I feel like when players explain their problems with Duskmourn, they kind of suck at it. Like, even me, I suck at explaining a lot of my problems with it. I enjoy Duskmourn because there are things in it that I like. I like horror. I like the horror aesthetic. I like the mechanics. I like Manifest Dread. But when I think of Duskmourn, I do think of it as just 80s horror. I don't think of it because Valgavoth's a cool villain. I don't think of it because the house is a cool idea. I don't think of it because players were like Jace was trying to save loot from Valgavoth. I don't think about it for any of that shit. I think about it because it's just 80s horror with a magic coat of paint, which is a very boring way to look at an otherwise fun set to play. The set had too much going on. The enchantment theme, rooms, Manifest Dread, Eerie, the return of Delirium, Impending, Glimmer, Survival Overlords. It all interacted with Graveyard, but it was also a lot. I don't know if I think it was a lot. So, like, Manifest Dread is just a twist on Manifest. That's fine. Eerie is just enchantments. Like, it's just Enchantress. The Eerie mechanic feeds into the rooms, so that's fine. The rooms, again, they're just kicker. The return of Delirium, again, it's a returning mechanic. It's fine. Impending. So, Impending being separate from the Overlords. I mean, the Overlords are where the big impending mechanic is. I feel like those are just the same thing, and the Overlords are fine. Like, this is like saying that the problem with Kaladesh is the Gearhulks, and the problem with Theros is the Titans. Like, I don't think that's the case. I think that the Overlords are fine. We almost always have that, like, one thematic grouping of big, dumb ETB dudes, and that's what the Overlords are. They're fine. Speaking of which, I need to get a red Overlord, and I need to get a blue Overlord for my Saheeli deck that I just rebuilt, because drawing is cool and blowing things up is cool, so I need to get those. Foundations, this was my favorite set of the year. This is my favorite set of the entire goddamn year. I love Foundations. This felt like a core set. I mean, it's what a core set should be. Yes, this felt like a core set in all the right ways. It had reprints of previously expensive cards, like Dreadhorde General is now $7. That's so goddamn good. God, I love Foundations. Okay. Did a great job at making the sales pitch for a core set, using its card selection, reprints, and new cards to show off all the cool things that Magic has to offer. This involved highlighting a lot of the cool creative elements and deciduous mechanics. It leaned into the complexity as a feature, not a bug, and the response to this has been spectacular. Yeah, I adore Foundations. Foundations having the beginner box, great. Foundations not having commander decks, great. Foundations having a starter kit that is a beginning collection is the best version of the deck builder's toolkit they have ever made. Fucking fantastic. I love that shit. All of my criticisms for how Wizards does things evaporate when I'm looking at Foundations, and then they come back when I look at other sets. Speaking of that, Aetherdrift. Fuck this set. Fuck everything that it stands for. I hate this thing. Players enjoyed having vehicles as a mechanic focus. Okay? Start Your Engines created an interesting limited environment, and that is the only place where Start Your Engines matters. I am going to be honest, the more I try to make Start Your Engines work in Commander, the more I want to rip my hair out. I feel like Start Your Engines is a mechanic that only works in a 60-card format, which is fine. But that 60-card format having only a handful of cards that see the mechanic means that it just, I've never seen Start Your Engines make a splash in Standard when I've messed with that. I don't see it in Pioneer when I play on Arena. I don't see it anywhere except the limited environment, and that's usually the sign of an iffy mechanic. Going to see 3 different planes in one set was nice. I feel like that's only okay. Like, I don't want to see 3 planes in one set. I want to see one plane that gets explored really, really well, especially when one of the planes is one that we really don't go to, like Muruganda. We've been to Amonkhet, we've been to Avishkar, but we haven't really been to Muruganda for any extended amount of time. Give us my set with my big stompy vanilla boys, please. Lessons. Players preferred more emphasis on the planes and less on the race. Yes, please. Holy shit, the race is the worst part of that entire thing. I want to see stories taking place in there, not just one event over the course of like an hour. Having 3 planes and 10 racing teams. Yeah, what the fuck is so I had no idea what the racing teams were. I know that what Amonkhet won, I believe, but like I don't know past that. I don't know anything past that. I don't remember any of it. I didn't internalize any of it. The racing theme wasn't well received. The set was on the weak side and didn't offer a lot for constructed. The other big problem with Aetherdrift was that the major themes in the set didn't land in constructed formats. Yeah, okay, cool. Then we have Dragonstorm. Dragonstorm, again, this is a no notes kind of set. I loved Dragonstorm a lot, but what lessons did they learn here? Limited drifted to the 2 extremes. As Tarkir draft settled, there ended up being 2 basic strategies: play red-white aggro or play green-based 4 or 5 color strategy. I always did the green-based 4 or 5 color strategy, so they're not wrong there. Omen spells look too much like adventure spells. Yeah, most of the players in my LGS couldn't wrap their hands around the Omen mechanic at first because it was just looks like adventure. It's templated that way. And then Final Fantasy. Okay, so I'm in 2 camps of Final Fantasy. I love the Final Fantasy set. I am super happy with how it came out. I want it to never happen again. Like, I like the Final Fantasy set. I adore this set. I've got a lot of things from this set. I have enjoyed my time with it. I hate all of Magic being Universes Beyond. I do not like this set existing. I like what I played of it. I have enjoyed the limited environment. I have enjoyed the precons. I have enjoyed playing with the individual cards. I feel like I would have enjoyed all of that if they had been Magic the Gathering characters instead of Final Fantasy characters. Let's see, the lessons that they had were not everything in the set captured what Final Fantasy was. Yeah, you tried to shove 15 games. Like, you don't get to capture 15 games in a single card set without it feeling like you didn't get everything represented. I think that that's always going to be a problem with that set. Again, I feel like I would have enjoyed the set as much, if not more, with it not being Final Fantasy. It did make me go back and play a bunch of Final Fantasy games, though. I'm in the middle of 5. I beat 8. I beat 1. I beat 3 and 4. I've chewed through a lot of Final Fantasy games because of this set, but that's just because they had the pictures of the Final Fantasy characters on them more than anything. See, the creative was less cohesive than in other Universes Beyond sets. The biggest note I got from players who were unfamiliar with the Final Fantasy franchise was that the creative design of the set felt less cohesive than other Universes Beyond sets. Yeah, again, you cannot have this kind of cohesion when you're trying to adhere to what makes these characters great and also live in the world where you shove 16 games worth of content into a single 300+ card set. It just doesn't work. The bonus sheet had some layout issues. My problem with the bonus sheet was less the layout issues. Like, obviously, not knowing what color cards were is a bad idea. But my biggest problem with the bonus sheet was that it was just screenshots from the games. And I, as a person who's played Weiss and who played the Yu Yu Hakusho card game, and as somebody who's played a lot of these games that are based off of screenshots of an anime, I'm so tired of that shit. And then Maro goes on to say that, let's see, there are ongoing complaints about Universes Beyond sets. This is the only randomized Universes Beyond product that I'm talking about today. I sadly didn't have space to discuss Magic the Gathering Assassin's Creed. It's a blog. Yes, you did. I'm using this section to go over much of the feedback about Universes Beyond in general. There are still players that do not like what we're doing, Universes Beyond. Hi, I'm one of them. Although that sentiment continually shrinks over time. That is called Stockholm Syndrome, Maro. People want to play Magic the Gathering. They don't want to leave Magic the Gathering. But our experiences with Magic the Gathering are informed by having to engage with these things that we were told once upon a time we would not have to. Once upon a time, we were told that Universes Beyond was for Secret Lair, and that universes within versions of those cards would be printed into sets. And that was what we were going to have to deal with. And that was fine. Players adjusted. Then we were told that, oh, it's only going to be occasional precons and that. Okay, cool. That means that I can choose not to engage with Universes Beyond if I so choose. Commander players have access to lots of different trading cards. We can build decks with different cards that are not in Universes Beyond if we so choose. Then we were told that Well, Lord of the Rings is going to be a straight to modern set, and Assassin's Creed is going to be a straight to modern set. And then that means, okay, cool. Well, that means that if I want to play modern, I have to deal with Universes Beyond. No ifs, ands, or buts. But I could still play Standard and Pioneer and avoid them. And then Final Fantasy and Spider-Man are being printed, and Avatar is being printed into Standard. So now there is no aspect of Magic the Gathering that can be enjoyed that does not include Universes Beyond. And that's stupid. That's just stupid. I'm sorry, but Magic is not Fortnite. What is good for the sales figures does not mean that it is good for the health of the IP. Fortnite gets a lot of its traction because of the collaborations. I get that. That's a golden pot that Hasbro, as a toy company, wants to chase. But I feel like as a game company, when you have a strong IP and a strong identity, you lean into that. And Wizards does not. They have not for a very long time. They choose to keep their stories about their game on their website instead of a thing that players immediately get just by buying product. They used to do that when books were available in fat packs. They do not lean into their characters. They tried when we got the Planeswalkers, once the Planeswalkers came out and we were given the Gatewatch, they tried to lean super hard into those characters, and then those characters eventually fell flat, because that's what happens when you have characters like the Planeswalkers. They either live long enough to die and be super cool, or they get flanderized eventually. Characters like Liliana were very interesting and had super interesting stories, and now they don't have a ton of areas that they can go. Characters like Jace died in the story and then just kept on trucking on like it never fucking happened. Characters like that are not fun to revisit every single set, and yet we do. And I feel like Wizards does not know how to lean into mascotting for their sets. They could lean into it by actually executing a competent multimedia strategy. And the most they've tried to do have been books, which they've largely abandoned, and comics, which don't really see as many people caring about them as much as they should. They don't lean into the video game space that much outside of giving us Magic Arena. They don't lean into the movie space. They don't lean into any other space. They don't lean into the TV space, even though we've been told that they're going to. You want to make Magic the Gathering have a cool brand cohesion and a cool brand that people can look at and have recognizable characters, then you make that happen. You go where those customers are. Those customers are in movie theaters. Those customers are sitting down watching a Netflix show with their partner. Those customers are largely there. They are not engaging directly with Magic. The only strategy that Wizards has engaged in to get people who do not engage with Magic to engage with Magic has been Universes Beyond. But that means that players engage with Magic because they want to play Final Fantasy or they want to play Sonic the Hedgehog, not because they want to play Magic the Gathering. And that's kind of a shame. So, I don't know. This is something that could be easily improved upon if another set of multimedia design principles were employed, kind of like what Pokemon does, honestly. Another year goes by. This wraps up this last year of Magic design. I'm always happy to have a chance to go through it and review all the feedback I've received in the last year's worth of sets. Thank you to everybody who took time to give me feedback. Well, consider this video my feedback. I love a lot of the sets that came out this year. I have an overall design problem with Magic the Gathering that I do not feel like is ever going to be fixed, because I feel like those complaints about Universes Beyond and how sets get, hat sets, and how we don't have a return to blocks, I feel like all of those complaints are just on deaf ears. I feel like nobody at Wizards of the Coast actually cares about that stuff at all. And that makes me sad. That really makes me sad. But let me know what y'all think in the comment section below. This has been my take on all of this. I have my opinions, and I'm sure that y'all have your opinions on this as well. Many of you maybe came in because of Universes Beyond. Many of you maybe came in because of Magic's IP. Maybe many of you came in because you have a friend who wanted you to play, and now you're stuck here forever spending all of your hard-earned cash. Who knows? But let me know in the comment section below where you stand right now in regards to all this. For me, I stand to hop on stream on Twitch. That's what I'm about to do. So Thank you all for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you. And as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here.